what that means in a second. So the first civilization we're talking about is Mesopotamia, and that is Mr. Nolan's head on one of the Mesopotamian gods. So here we go. Geography of Mesopotamia. Okay, Mesopotamia means the land between rivers. Okay, so the area that we call Mesopotamia is in between the Tigris and the Euphrates River. So on your little maps, you want to fill out that the Tigris River is right there, the Euphrates River just a little bit under it, and then when we talk about Mesopotamia, we kind of mean this area that's kind of in between the Tigris and Euphrates River, kind of the area in between and around it. So this is kind of the birthplace of civilization. This is where the first kind of big cities, big civilizations started to pop up thousands of years ago. Okay? So the rivers flooded at least once a year. Okay, the Tigris and Euphrates flood at least once a year, but the flooding is unpredictable. Okay, so they didn't quite know when it was going to flood. There was long periods of little to no rain, so life was kind of difficult for these people around the Tigris and Euphrates River because of this unpredictable flooding. Now, the floods do leave behind fertile soil, okay, and this is going to help them farm, and this is one of the reasons they're able to create these big cities in Mesopotamia. Okay, they're going to create and grow wheat and barley. That's going to be what they eat for the most part. Okay, so when we're talking about the geography of the region, as you can see from this picture is a picture of the Euphrates River. Okay, so you can see it's kind of flat. There's not a lot of mountains. You don't really see much desert or other big bodies of water. It's just kind of the river and then flat land all around. So there's no natural barriers to protect from invasion. There's not a whole lot of natural resources in the area, as you can kind of see, so they have to innovate to survive. Alright, so how do they innovate to survive? The first thing they're going to do is something called irrigation. Okay, very, very important, irrigation. So they're going to do this thing called irrigation, which means they're moving water from the rivers into the fields. Okay, so you can see from these pictures here, there's rivers out here, and then they move the water in through these channels, okay, and then that's how they get it into the fields. Alright? So, in addition to that, they're going to create mud bricks to build walls around their cities. So we said there wasn't a whole lot of natural barriers, so they have to build walls to protect themselves from invasion. And they're going to trade grain, cloth, and tools with neighboring people for their natural resources. Okay? So as you can kind of see from these pictures here, this is how maybe a Mesopotamian farm would look like. We'd see kind of water flowing in to the farms from the river, and that's how they'd kind of keep their farms up to date. So they're going to develop a form of written language known as cuneiform. This is basically when they kind of get rocks or big tabs of rock and they kind of hammer little symbols into it, and that's how they keep track of records and keep track of writing. One of the famous written things that they created was the Code of Laws. It's called Hammurabi's Code, which we'll probably get into more later in the year. Advancements in geometry and architecture. As you can see here, this is called a ziggurat. We're going to talk about it in a couple slides, but basically they were able to create large, impressive buildings. They developed the wheel. Okay, so now they don't have to carry everything by hand anymore. They can go ahead and wheel things around. This makes it easier to farm. This makes it easier to build things. This makes it easier to just kind of live life. So the wheel is very crucial. And they're also going to use bronze tools, which help in farming, good for weapons, make things a little bit easier as far as technology. Okay, the next thing, social structure and government. So the key thing to understand about Mesopotamia is that it's organized into city-states. What is a city-state? It's basically a city and the area that surrounds it. Okay, so this is like a small country. Alright? So if Patriot High School was a city-state, it would be called Patriot City-State, and we control the school and we control the area around it. We control the football field, we control the tennis courts, we control the baseball field, even though nobody cares about baseball, especially not Mr. Nolan, because baseball is, let's be real, not as much of a sport as tennis. Alright, anyway, They're going to be organized into city-states. So you see Kish here, you see Umma, you see Uruk, you see okay? Babylon might be a city-state you might see pop up. All these city-states kind of vie for power and kind of, skirmish with each other a little bit. They compete with each other. Alright. Once you're in a Mesopotamian city, the ziggurat is the place of worship, okay? It's basically the place where people go to worship their gods. It's where the government officials will kind of rule from. Okay, that's what city hall means. It means the place where the government is run. And the social structure government. Alright, Mesopotamian kings are representatives of the gods. Okay, this means that the gods gave them authority to rule. Okay, something called the divine right to rule, which we'll go into later, the mandate of heaven. But the main social order, you see kings and priests at the top. Okay, religious people are going to be very important in this day and age. Merchants will be next, large landowners, maybe soldiers, and then kind of the lowly farmers, the lowly commoners, and then slaves. Okay, slavery, a big part of society. They're going to be at the bottom of the list. So Mr. Grimsland would probably be up here somewhere as a king or a priest. Okay, whereas perhaps Mr. Nolan, just a lowly commoner, unfortunately for him.